Right.
Do you mind if I film you?
Fine.
Oh, okay.
It's not for publication.
No.
Okay.
Just kids, grandkids.
Yeah, that's fine. We're in between our two 18th century taverns, the Eagle Tavern and the Tap Room across the street there. Today the Tap Room is furnished as a tavern would have been in the 18th century. That'll be the first building that we go inside. The Eagle Tavern is a museum on colonial taverns and tavern life. That'll be the second building that we see. The Eagle Tavern has been moved twice in its history. It was originally located down King Street, several blocks, it was originally located very near the Roanoke River, where the Andrew Jackson Elementary School building now stands. And if you look in the distance, you can see a long, modern building that was the original site of Eagle Hotel. We believe this building was built as an addition to Eagle Hotel in the 1790s to house the bar and the restaurant type facilities for Eagle Hotel. Now, it was purchased in the 1840s by a local family who moved it several blocks down King Street, and they lived in it for several generations, and then it was eventually donated to become a part of the historic site and was moved to this location in the late 1970s, and by then the school had been built, so the original spot was no longer available. Then a further restoration was conducted on the building, and then the exhibits that you'll see opened a little over 10 years ago now. Now, we'll go inside the tap room.
When this was moved, you said it like in the 1840s?
1840s, right.
Was it then still a tavern, or just lived as a home?
It had been a tavern, but the family that moved it lived in it as a home after they relocated it. Right. We know a gentleman named Jacob Johnston was granted a license from the town of Halifax to operate a tavern on this town lot in 1792. So we believe this was likely the building that he used when he opened his business. And we know that it operated under many different names, under many different owners throughout its history. The last time that it was used as an inn or that type of facility was in the latter part of the 1800s into the early 1900s. It operated as Pope's Hotel. It became a private residence after that point, and then became a part of the historic site around the 1970s. Restoration was performed on the building, and then we now have it furnished as a tavern would have been in the late 1790s. The building did undergo some changes over the years. We know that the building was added onto on the rear and to the side, and eventually this was connected to other buildings on adjacent lots, and it spanned most of the block. In fact, the next two lots were taken up by buildings that were all connected together, so that by the latter part of the 19th century, this was part of a sprawling complex with something like 19 fireplaces. And we know that from an insurance document. So over the years, it may have grown from just a very basic tavern, which you'll see how we have it interpreted today, to a much larger tavern around the middle. This represents what a bar room or dining room in a tavern would look like in the latter part of the 18th century. You'll notice a couple of different dining tables here. This sort of represents two different ways that dining tables were furnished in taverns. Some people may have been buying more food than others. Maybe they would have had a several course meal, and they would have been served in a fancier manner. You'll see this table has a linen tablecloth and creamware, china, and glassware, a large punch bowl, where this table is much more basic, no tablecloth, and lots of pewter on that table and a smaller punch bowl in the center. You would have had travelers who were here and wanted just the basics of supper and breakfast before traveling on their way the next day. Whereas you would have had also locals who were here mainly for entertainment. They would have had refreshment and maybe would have spent time playing cards or checkers or draughts as it was called in the 18th century. Their checkerboard was made of wood. The checkers were made of wood as well. And then we have a board game here, reprint of an 18th, very popular board game in the 18th century called the game of Goose. Their board games were printed on paper. The bar here represents a typical bar in a tavern of the time. And it was a caged-off structure that added protection for the bartender and also would allow him to lock up his stock and his glassware, especially at night when people were staying overnight in the lodge room upstairs. Tabletop version of the game of nine pins or skittles was very popular at the time. And then we have a sheet of tavern rates here. This is a reprint from one of the time period. The pricing is pounds, shillings, and pence. Questions?
Is this the actual size of what that would be, or is that miniature?
Well, that is a typical, this shows you what the typical lodge room in a tavern would have been. You would have shared a room with other people, and people who were paying to stay overnight in a tavern were renting a space in which to sleep. So you've got in this bed 2 spaces, so 2 people would be renting the space. So if you were traveling alone, you would be most likely sharing a bed with someone you did not know, not only a room with other people you did not know. It was mainly the men who were traveling who would stay overnight in the taverns, in the lodge rooms. Women, when they would travel, would make arrangements to stay in homes of people they knew along the way. If they didn't know someone in a particular town, then perhaps they could make arrangements to stay maybe through a minister or a trustworthy person if he knew someone in the particular town they were going to be passing. And if you have any questions, just let me know. I'll be back at the visitor center behind us there. And if you'd like to look around and look through the colonial cemetery, or perhaps take a look down at the river overlook, you may find both of those interesting as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. If you'd like to do the film in the museum at the visitor center, you'll have an opportunity after.
Okay, cool.
All right.
Well, this is kind of like Bent's old fort, but only back in New England times. Places were a little more crowded back here. They still needed a place to sleep at night.